Welcome to Wonders Handle, where we explore the magnificent World Heritage Sites around the globe. Today, we embark on a journey to the heart of Mumbai, India, to uncover the architectural and historical marvel of Victoria Terminus, now known as Chhatrapati Shivaji Terminus. This iconic railway station is a symbol of Mumbai's rich heritage and a testament to the fusion of Victorian Gothic Revival and traditional Indian architecture. Situated on the western coast of India, where the city of Mumbai meets the Arabian Sea, Victoria Terminus stands as a grand reminder of a bygone era. The station was originally named in honor of Queen Victoria to commemorate the Golden Jubilee of her reign. In 1996, it was renamed Chhatrapati Shivaji Terminus to honor the legendary Maratha king, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. Designed by the British architect Frederick William Stevens, construction of Victoria Terminus began in 1878 and took a decade to complete. Stevens drew inspiration from late medieval Italian models, blending these with Indian architectural elements to create a unique and captivating structure. The result was a building that became not only a symbol of Mumbai, but also an architectural landmark recognized worldwide. As you approach the terminus, you are immediately struck by its grandiose facade. The station features an imposing stone dome, intricate turrets, pointed arches, and an eccentric ground plan reminiscent of traditional Indian palace architecture. The exterior of the building is adorned with elaborate stone carvings of flora, fauna, and mythological figures, all crafted by local Indian artisans. One of the most fascinating aspects of Victoria Terminus is its architectural synthesis. The building's layout and structural design follow the principles of Victorian Gothic Revival architecture, characterized by its high vaulted ceilings, pointed arches, and flying buttresses. However, the decorative elements, including the stone carvings, peacock motifs, and lion and tiger statues at the entrance, are deeply rooted in Indian tradition. This fusion of styles creates a visual and cultural bridge between the East and the West. Covering an area of 2.85 hectares, Victoria Terminus is a hub of activity, serving over 3 million commuters daily. Despite the constant hustle and bustle, the station retains its historical authenticity and structural integrity. The intricate 3D stone carvings, the stunning stained glass windows, and the Burma teak wood doors have all been meticulously preserved, maintaining the station's original charm. Victoria Terminus is not just a visual masterpiece. It also holds immense historical significance. It was the first railway terminus in the Indian subcontinent and quickly became a symbol of Mumbai's economic might. The station's advanced structural and technical solutions were revolutionary for the late 19th century, showcasing the ingenuity and collaborative spirit of its creators. But the story of Victoria Terminus extends beyond its architectural and historical marvels. It is also a living, breathing part of Mumbai's daily life. The station accommodates 7 suburban tracks and 11 outstation tracks, making it a critical junction for millions of commuters. Over the years, several modifications have been made to handle the increasing traffic, yet the station has managed to preserve its heritage and grandeur. Victoria Terminus has faced numerous challenges, from the pressures of urban development to the threat of pollution and congestion. Despite these obstacles, the station stands resilient thanks to the relentless efforts of the Indian Railways and the Mumbai Heritage Conservation Committee. In 1997, the government of Maharashtra declared Victoria Terminus a Heritage Grade 1 structure, recognizing its historical and architectural importance. This was followed by the station being inscribed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2004, further cementing its status as one of the finest examples of Victorian Gothic Revival architecture in India. Preserving this heritage site is a meticulous task. The day-to-day maintenance and protection of the building fall under the responsibility of the Divisional Railway Manager, Mumbai Division of Central Railway. Additionally, the Architectural Conservation Cell has been appointed to ensure the station's architectural conservation. Efforts are continually made to balance the station's heritage value with its functionality as a bustling railway hub. The Mumbai Urban Transportation Plan aims to upgrade the transport network, alleviate congestion, and ensure the station continues to serve its purpose without compromising its historical integrity. As we conclude our journey through Victoria Terminus, we are reminded of the remarkable interplay between history and modernity, tradition and innovation. The station is not just a railway terminus. It is a living museum, a symbol of Mumbai's rich heritage and enduring spirit. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of one of the world's most iconic railway stations. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Wonders Handle for more captivating stories from World Heritage Sites across the globe. Until next time, keep exploring and stay curious.